Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Storytime. On today's episode, we're once again going into the woods with 10 exciting adventures from the woods. I love these stories. I've got some stories from people camping out there, some park rangers, and even some stories about being lost in the woods. So if you enjoyed these stories, then make sure you stay tuned for more. Very quickly, if you haven't noticed it yet, we do have official merchandise. If you would like to go ahead and check it out, then you have two options of seeing it. Either one, you can visit the link in the description below, or if you want, you could actually check it out here on the watch page. There's shirts, sweaters, stickers, mugs, so many different things. But that's enough from me. Let's get on to these stories, shall we? Here we go. Number 1. This story happened about a month ago. It involves one of the most concerning things that's ever happened to me. Looking back on it, I'm just glad everything turned out all right. I still remember it because school was going to be starting in a couple of weeks. After I had returned with my mom and dad from a cruise, I was feeling pretty down. It's like whenever you go on vacation, you come back to reality and you always miss the fun you had. We had taken a cruise to the Bahamas, and since there is nothing to do at home, I still wanted to do something fun before going back to school. This was going to be my senior year of high school, and with only 2 weeks left of vacation, I ended up getting a call from my uncle. Hey, I heard you had nothing to do. We talked to your mom and dad. We were thinking, do you want to go to the woods with your cousins Lisa and Steven? What do you think? Does that sound like a plan? Of course it was. After all, I'm looking at a rough schedule. Plenty of courses to take in sports. Well, a trip to the woods would be amazing. 2 days later on a Friday morning, my Uncle Patrick and Aunt Julie picked me up, and we drive with my cousins to their small house. The drive out into the woods was pretty uneventful. I did see a few animals here and there as we made our way, but other than that, it was pretty much private property. We arrived at a crossroads that led two ways. One way led to my aunt and uncle's land, and the other I wasn't sure of. I wanted to know where the road went to, so my uncle said, "Oh, that road? That goes to the surrounding neighbor's home. His name's John. Really nice man. He takes care of our property when we're not there." We drive another 10 minutes, and we arrived next to a small little lake. Right next to the lake was my uncle and aunt's home. Now, this was the first time I was seeing it. Actually, my uncle had just purchased it less than a year ago. The night there was pretty uneventful. Me and my cousins stayed up and watched some movies, and my uncle and aunt worked on some papers for their business. The next morning, my uncle and aunt had something come up with their business, and so they said they would have to head back to town. Obviously, we didn't want to leave just yet, so we told them we would stay and keep an eye on the house. They said it was a fantastic idea. Remember, just call John if you need anything. He's always checking out the area, so you're in good hands. At around noon, they ended up leaving and heading back to town. Now it was just Lisa, Steven, and myself. Having this entire place for ourselves? Well, it was a dream to say the least. It was like staying overnight at an ice cream store with all the ice cream you wanted. Sadly, that dream would turn completely around that night. We spent the day walking around the woods and exploring everything around us. We went into the woods to take pictures, saw a few rabbits and squirrels here and there, and we even found a cave. By now it was about 7 p.m. and night was about to arrive. It was now that I remembered my uncle mentioning something. There was a small cave, and inside there was a little reservoir of water. Being the high schoolers we were always so brave and confident. We went inside with no problems whatsoever. Everything was going well. We found that pool of water and thought it was pretty fascinating. We started noticing something as we looked around, though. It looked like there were some food wrappers and even some empty water bottles. We even found a small little mattress. I don't remember seeing anybody else out here, so I did find it strange that this was here. As we were about to turn around and leave, my cousin Steven said he heard a noise. Did you two hear that? What, the echo? Well, yeah, we're in a cave after all. You're funny. No, not the echo. I heard something else. Listen. We all went quiet and listened. In one of the dark corners of the cave, we started hearing movement. As we stood there confused and frozen, we started seeing what looked like a person. I only got a quick look, but I saw a person in a hoodie and dark clothing, and they appear to be holding some sort of axe. We take off running as we can hear him chasing us out of the cave. We run back to the house expecting him to have followed us there, but we don't see or hear anything. From there, we locked all the windows and doors and still heard nothing. We were pretty nervous at this point. Here we were in this house, and my uncle and aunt were nowhere to be found. They were at least an hour away from us. The closest person was John, but remember, he lived on the other side of the woods. Immediately, we ended up calling him. He answered the phone almost immediately, but unfortunately, he told us, "Sorry, kids, but I'm actually away at the moment. Me and my wife are on vacation right now. We won't be there until next weekend. Why, is something wrong?" We explained the situation, and he was surprised by what we told him. "That's strange. Come to think of it, I do remember something. There was somebody looking around my yard at night last week. The thing is, by the time I got outside to chase him away, he was already running off into the woods. Honestly, I thought it was just some random camper out there. I didn't see him again after that, so I was pretty sure that's what it was." Great. So now if we wanted to get out of here, we would have to walk, and it's at least 2 miles to the exit of the woods. After that, it's another few miles to get to the nearby small town. At this point, it's about 9 p.m. We weren't about to go walking out there. With no other options left, I get on the phone and have a dispatcher send somebody out. They told us an officer could get there in about 20 minutes. All right, so all we had to do was wait 20 minutes or less, and we would be all right. I'll tell you, those were the slowest 20 minutes of our life. We sat there with the lights off waiting, and that's when we saw the automatic light in the back of the house turn on. I wanted to hope it was an animal out there, but we hadn't heard the sound of an animal. Carefully and quietly, I looked out the window. That's where I see the shadows of 2 people. With the light outside, I was able to recognize one of them. One of the strangers looked just like the person we had seen back at the cave about an hour ago. The other person was somebody we hadn't seen yet. Now, I don't think they knew we were inside the house, so we stayed quiet and made our way to the second floor. As we do, my cousin Lisa was on the phone, explaining the situation to the dispatcher. We went into the upstairs room and we locked ourselves in there. As we sat there for what felt like an eternity, we heard the noise of doorknobs trying to be opened. Now, we even hear kicking on the doors. It was silent, but we could hear the sound of talking outside. I couldn't really hear exactly what they said, but I heard something along the lines of, "Hey, come over here. Look, let's try opening this window." Instantly, I froze. I knew which window they were talking about right away. You see, one of the small windows in one of the downstairs rooms was stuck, and it didn't really close properly. I was really hoping they wouldn't have found it, but it looks like they were successful. It was now we hear the sound of them struggling to open it. As we hear that, we now start hearing the sounds of sirens. That was then followed by red and blue lights. As I look out the window, I see officers arriving. That's followed by the 2 making their way into the woods. One of the group of officers make their way into the woods. Another 2 come up to the house and yell out that they had arrived. The lady on the phone tells my cousin Julie that we can open the doors now, and so we do. About 10 minutes later, the 2 from earlier were found and taken away. Now that everything was all right, they offered to take us to town so we can have my aunt and uncle pick us up. We didn't even second guess it. We headed to town, and about a few hours later, my aunt and uncle showed up. We were pretty shaken up from the entire thing, but we ended up going home just fine after that. I will never forget my time out there in the woods. Looking back on it, I wonder if the person we had seen in the cave had been the one that was looking around John's property at night. I guess we'll never know. But for now, that's our experience and story. Number 2. Alright, so I'll start my story with a little bit of background context. I'm currently 30 years old. and this involves an experience of when I'd moved out from the home I was living in. This was about 2 years ago, so I was 28 years old. I had some roommates I was staying with in town, and I had wanted to move out for the longest time. To end up moving out and saving money, I worked 2 jobs, one at a coffee shop and another at a diner. It was a lot of work, and it did cost me some sleep, but finally, after some hard work and being lucky, I ended up finding a place for myself. Just recently, I'd found a small little home. It was for sale in the woods, about 30 minutes away from town. There were only about 3 homes in that area, but they were so spread apart. Honestly, it was pretty much like you were out in the middle of nowhere. One day I got out there with my roommate Rebecca, and we checked out the property. I was right. It was pretty much as quiet as it got. I was a little concerned with it being so far away from town, but after living in such a busy area, even I was ready to be out on my own. I ended up signing all the papers, and on that day, I ended up getting the home. For the next couple of weeks, my roommates helped me move everything into my new home. It was perfect. No more traffic, no more cars, little noise, no more people, right? Well, as we get into the main part of my story, something out there in the woods really made me feel like I wasn't alone out there. For the first few months, everything was alright. I woke up, went to work, got home, relaxed, and it was another day. Soon, I was feeling pretty lonely, so I eventually ended up adopting a dog. Her name was Amanda, and she was the love of my life. I'd always wanted a dog, so having her there with me was perfect. I had noticed that about a month after I gotten her, she had started to act very weird. She would be restless at night. She would whine, she would cry, and she would try to get my attention. She would always look out the window, but I would never see anything. This was only the beginning of some of the strange activity there. There were times when I would walk with Amanda in the woods. We would hear the sounds of footsteps and even branches breaking. There was this strange feeling of being watched and being followed. Of course, Amanda would try to protect me and warn me, but there was never anything. My first thought was that it was one of the neighbors out in the woods, but there were 3 things wrong with that. 1, it was winter time in the northeast, so I highly doubt you would be out there in the cold. 2, the nearest person was about 7 miles away. Also, any time I would hear or experience anything, I would call the neighbors. They would tell me that they were never out there. I always believed them, and they told me there were times that even they would feel the same way. One night, I remember I'd gotten home pretty late and decided to take Amanda for a walk. It had snowed earlier in the day, but it was a beautiful night. There was something about walking in the snow that was so peaceful. Perhaps the cool air, or the sound of stepping on the snow with your snow boots. Anyways, as we ended up taking the usual route, it had started to get pretty late, so we started to head back home. About 10 minutes into our walk, I had started getting that same feeling again, the feeling like we weren't alone out there. I'm not sure how to really best explain it, unless you've been in a situation like this. I guess you won't know until you're actually in it. My dog had started to get nervous and started barking out into the woods. This was the first time she had actually barked, so I could tell there was something more going on here. We continued to walk as Amanda kept trying to get my attention on something. When we make a turn on the trail, I happened to spot something in the corner of my eye. I wasn't exactly sure what I saw, but I could see the shadow of somebody really tall. Amanda now started barking once again. As I stood there for a few seconds looking, I hear what sounds like the person was mimicking me. I'm not sure if this person was playing games with me or not, but I'd never had anything like this happen before. I should mention now that everything seemed silent in the woods. The crickets and owls and even the breeze I was hearing had seemed to go silent. I now hear what sounds like somebody laughing, and with that, I take off running with Amanda. As we are running, I hear the sounds of branches moving and footsteps. When we exit the woods and head towards the house, I happen to look behind me. I see nothing. It wasn't until I was inside the house I ended up taking a look back outside towards the woods. I saw what looked like somebody staring back at me from behind some of the trees. From there, they made their way back into the woods. From that night on out, I never went out into those woods. Sadly, the strange things never stopped. Over the next few weeks, I would hear the sounds of scratching on the windows and knocking on the doors. Every time I would check outside in the morning, there was nothing. It's remained a mystery, and I never did follow up on if anything else happened out there. I moved out a few weeks after that, and that was that. The last thing I heard was that one of the people that lived out there was experiencing similar things, pretty much the same thing I was going through. I haven't talked to them in a long time, so I haven't found out more. Whether or not somebody has moved into the home I was living in, I'm not sure, but I've tried to put those experiences behind me. Now that I'm remembering this story and experience, I think I'll look into it more. I'll make sure to update you all next time. Number 3. This is something that just happened to me pretty recently. In fact, it happened just last night, and I wanted to talk about it since it's so fresh in my mind. First, let me explain this area that I live in. I live in a small town by the ocean where my house is located down a lonely road. There are a few other homes out here, but they're spread apart by a few acres of land. These acres are mainly used for farming and animals, but that doesn't stop me and my brothers from taking our ATVs out there and going down the trails. It's actually a lot of fun. Surrounding us are woods that go up into the mountains. Now, I'll be honest, it's pretty lonesome out there, and not many people go there. But still, it's a beautiful place to see. I think out of all the years I've been out there in the deeper part of the woods, I have only encountered a couple of families. The last time I saw anybody out there was about 2 years ago. So, yes, not many people go there. The nice part about these woods is you can actually take a couple of trails. They can take you to the other side of town. If you don't want to go out into the deep wilderness, then you can take the trail closest to the entrance of the trees. You can get around that way. So from time to time, me and my dog Heather will go out there for walks in these part of the woods. This night should have been like any other. Well, we end up going for our usual walk. While walking, I get a call from my friend Catherine. Hey, do you want to come on over? I'm going to be ordering some food and watching movies. You're more than welcome to come on over if you'd like. It sounded like a wonderful idea, and besides, I was already heading that way with Heather. It would be about a 30-minute walk, but hey, it would be worth it for the food and movies. As we're walking though, I felt like something was off. I could hear footsteps, but they weren't mine. I could even hear the sounds of leaves and branches moving. It wasn't windy that night, so I knew it wasn't the wind. Also, these noises didn't sound like it was from any sort of animal. We don't have bears or mountain lions in this area, so I knew it had to be something else. Even I could tell Heather wasn't feeling too good about the situation. She kept stopping and looking around me, almost like she was sensing somebody else was out here. This was then followed by her growling. I should explain that she's very well trained, and she never growls at anyone. For her to be doing this really did start to concern me. All of a sudden, I see somebody stepping out of the trees from the corner of my eye. I guess it's better to say stumbling out from behind the trees. There, standing about 50 feet from me, was a person wearing all dark clothing. I didn't mention this earlier, but by now it's close to 7:30 p.m., and it's in the summertime. Even though there was a little bit of sunlight left, the surrounding trees did make it hard to see at night. I was hoping he would end up leaving, but he says, "You should train your dog better. She's so annoying. You need to tell her to be quiet now." Very rude for him to say that, but I apologize for the inconvenience as not to make him angry. After all, I had no idea if he was planning anything. He was acting very suspiciously, and he kept looking behind him, almost like he was very paranoid. The way he spoke definitely made it sound like he wasn't just out there for a nature walk either. "Well, once again, I'm really sorry, sir. Have yourself a good night, all right?" With that, me and Heather walk out of there. He's just staring back at us. I was hoping this was the end, but it still wasn't. At this point, I can see the exit of the woods and the street lamps of the park. Right as we're a few hundred yards from the exit, I once again start hearing footsteps in the woods, and my dog starts growling. I didn't have to second guess what was going on here. That man from earlier? Well, he's now slowly following me. I stopped to confirm I wasn't hearing things, and when I did stop, the noise stopped completely too. When I started walking again, the footsteps picked up. I told Heather to run, and we both make a mad dash towards the exit. I happen to look back, and I see that man from earlier now running too. Luckily for me, I'm now in the park, and I see a security guard up ahead of me. I scream and I yell, and I try to get his attention. I think stranger friend from the woods had seen him too, because when I looked around me, he's running back into the woods. I ended up explaining everything to him, and I thank him for helping me. I was able to make it to my friend's house just fine, but I never did find out if he was found or not. I haven't seen him since. Number 4. So my story is a little bit different than others. Normally, the typical story of going out into the woods is encountering a stranger, and of course being followed around. Though nothing like that happened in my case, it was still a pretty concerning experience nonetheless. Alright, so to set up the story, I was actually on vacation, staying with my uncle Roger in Alaska. He owned some property out in the woods. He called me because he was looking for somebody to help him out on his land for a while. I had nothing else going on at the time since I wasn't working, so I thought why not? It's a wonderful plan. I'm from Montana, so I didn't really worry about the temperatures too much. I was already used to the cold. So about a week later, I ended up getting on a plane and I head over to Alaska. I ended up going for a month and stayed throughout the month of February. While there, I enjoyed my time. I helped my uncle around the property, helped feed the animals, and made sure to keep an eye out for wolves and bears. One day, my uncle was going to town for the day. He was going to take care of some business-related matters. I offered to stay behind and keep an eye on everything. He told me he would be gone for most of the day, but he told me I was free to do anything I wanted to do. I went through the normal chores that day, and around 3:30 p.m., I was already getting pretty bored. I decided, as something different, I would go into the woods and explore. Now, I was very naive at the age of 19. Never in my mind did I think about getting lost. I was always somebody that could always go out into the woods and always find my way around. So once I put everything away, I grab my sweater and warm clothing, and I walk out into the woods. Yes, I went with no supplies. I know, big mistake. All I had with me were my phone and a water bottle, so I thought it would be fine. Once again, I know not the smartest idea, but whatever. As I make my way throughout these woods I've never been to, I see so many different things. I see trees, obviously, a little frozen pond, and even some abandoned cabins. It was like stepping into a time machine when I walked inside those cabins. I'm not exactly sure who had been living there, but they were pretty neat nonetheless. In my time exploring the woods, I hadn't really paid attention to the time. I was having so much fun that I hadn't realized it was getting dark. This was a time in Alaska where there really wasn't too much sunlight. By now it was around 5:30. It's already dark out there. Using my light from my phone, I try to find my way back. Unfortunately, I had underestimated my memory because finding my way around wasn't exactly too easy. About 20 minutes of walking around, I realized I was now lost. Bear in mind, I'd only walked about a mile into the woods, but since it was so dark, I had no idea where I was. Immediately, the idea dawned on me. I needed to call my uncle. That's exactly what I do. It should have worked, if it weren't for the fact that the cell phone reception was spotty at best. The first time the call went through, but it went right to voicemail. Hello, this is Roger. I'm unable to make it to the phone right now, but please leave a message, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you. Great, no answer. The second and third time I called, the call didn't even go through. Here I was in the complete dark of night in the woods, lost. I only had my phone and a water bottle. I had a few options, but I tried to remember some of the landmarks I had seen. Obviously, I knew where those cabins were, but if I can find that little tiny frozen pond, I knew I wouldn't be too far away from where I had gone. I continued to walk around there for another hour, and it's now getting colder. Now I'm thinking about making a fire, if I'd planned to stay out there, of course. I second guessed that because I started hearing movement by the trees. Was it a bear? Was it a wolf? I was hoping they were still hibernating right now, so I tried to calm myself down. When I moved my light from the phone around, it just turned out to be a couple of rabbits, so that was good. About another 15 minutes go on by, and I can see a light in the distance. That was accompanied by yelling. At first, I couldn't tell what was being said, but then I heard, "Tony, are you out here? Where are you?" It was my Uncle Roger. I yelled out to him, and eventually I joined him. He had another friend with him, and they were looking for me. It turned out that I was about 30 minutes of a walk away from my uncle's house. So, yes, I was pretty far out into the woods. My uncle wasn't exactly too happy that I'd gone into the woods alone, but in the end, he was just thankful nothing happened to me. We make the walk back to the cabin, and I ended up having a nice warm meal afterwards. Ever since then, I only go out into those woods if my Uncle Roger goes with me. I think my days of exploring woods I'm unfamiliar with are taking a break. Number 5. As someone who has spent a lot of time in the deep woods, I've experienced my fair share of stories. Whether it be running into some random person in the woods or even being a hero, these are stories and experiences I feel would be great to share with all of you. As some background on myself, I had started working as a park ranger in a state park. Growing up, I'd always dreamed of a job that would involve working in nature, and this was perfect for me. I'd actually studied biology in university, so I was pretty knowledgeable with everything around me. This, of course, involved having a knowledge on what sorts of noises animals make, as well as being able to identify plants and trees. With that background information on myself out of the way, to say this summer was empty in the park was definitely an understatement. We normally get families who come out here and go camping, but even in July, it was pretty quiet this year. If we did ever get calls from anyone that needed help, it was because they were lost or needed help getting firewood for their campfires. If it wasn't any of that, me and my fellow park rangers would just walk around the area. From time to time, we get calls to check out different areas, especially parts that are uninhabited and off limits to the campers. There is one area in particular, it's off limits to everyone. This is because the area is really difficult to get around. You need a vehicle to get there. The trails are very narrow and they go up into the mountains. Some people have actually gotten injured, so we decided it was best to close it off. While on the job one afternoon, I get a call from one of my fellow coworkers. He's saying he saw tracks in the dirt walking up to that area that was off limits. Our first concern was that somebody had gone up there and could run the risk of getting lost, or worse. I ended up calling my manager. I wanted to see if they received any sort of calls. Maybe somebody was out there. "I'm sorry, but as far as I know, there shouldn't be anybody out there. We never saw anybody on the cameras either, so we're not exactly too sure. Go check it out. Make sure nobody went out there by mistake." My manager mentioned cameras because we have cameras that watch the area. The tracks, well, they were just out of the view of the camera, so that's why my manager was unable to see them. With that, I drive in to join my coworker Ryan. It did take me a while to get there, due to how isolated everything is out there, but I ended up joining him soon enough. By now, it's about 5 p.m. in the afternoon. There was still light out, so we weren't worrying too much. We opened the entrance that was closed off and start making our drive carefully and slowly out there. There are two ways of going up there, so we took the easier of the two routes to make our way up to the mountain easier. While making our way up there, I noticed what looked to be food wrappers. We saw a small backpack and even a water bottle. They were just lying there next to the trail. We stopped the car and stepped out to inspect everything, but we didn't find anybody out there. Our concern now was that somebody was lost. We now spend the next few hours driving around the mountain area, trying to see if we can find anybody out there. That's when we reach a small little canyon area. It wasn't very steep and wouldn't hurt you too bad, but you could still get injured because of all the rocks and thorns. By now, we have spent a couple of hours out there trying to see if we could find anybody there. That's when we started hearing what sounded like a whistle. Me and Ryan were confused by the sound, but when we started seeing a light, we determined somebody was trying to get our attention. I guess with the noise of the car and our talking, and the sunlight still out there, we hadn't seen or heard anything. Remember that steep incline next to the mountain? We can see someone down about halfway, whistling, and using his light to try and get our attention. It looked like somebody sat down on one of the ledges. Instantly, I called out to them, "Hey, is everything all right? Don't worry, we're gonna get you out of there." "Yeah, I hurt my leg pretty bad, and it's hard to get up and move. My phone fell down the ledge, so I couldn't call anyone." I am so glad me and Ryan showed up when we did, because had we not, he would have been out there throughout the night. I called my manager and they end up arriving with backup. They bring climbing equipment and other supplies, and from there we make our way down to help him out. Once we made it back to the top, we were surprised he hadn't injured himself too much. He did have a broken leg, but other than that, he was very lucky. We called in a helicopter to get him some help. A few weeks later, he returned to visit us and say thank you. He explained what had happened to him. "Thank you so much for everything the two of you did for me. You see, I was out taking pictures and I happened to see moose. Obviously, I wanted to get closer to take some pictures for my photo album. I put my backpack down because I didn't want to surprise them with all the noise of the supplies in my backpack. From there, I tried to get closer to them, but in summary, I ended up following them, and with one wrong step, I fell, and that's where the two of you found me. Luckily, I did have that whistle on me, and my small little light, too." In the end, we were just happy he made it out all right, but it was a reminder, that's why you don't go out there on your own. So yes, not like many of the other stories, but I figured you would love to hear it nonetheless, especially from a park ranger. Thanks, I hope you liked my story. Number 6. I'm currently 47 years old, and I work as a park ranger for a national park. This was a dream job for me, and it was always fun being able to talk to others and interact with all the campers and people out exploring. I did have long hours, and for the most part I worked all week, but on the days I was off, I liked to actually go into the woods themselves and go camping. You would think with all the work I did in the park, I wouldn't want to be anywhere near it on my days off, but I considered this place like a second home. When I wasn't working or doing my typical work, I would usually be out here on my own. Since I'm so familiar with the area, I know all the fast ways around, and even know where all the secret spots were. I remember one weekend in particular. The park was closed for the weekend due to the weather, but we were still required to go and work, of course. I wasn't working that weekend, but I ended up going out on a Saturday afternoon and went exploring and camping out into the wilderness. Of course, silly me, I didn't actually tell my fellow co-workers, so no one actually knew I was there or I was heading that way. I was going to an area where we rarely go to, but I love going there. You can see the entire park. You have an amazing view of the valley and even a large lake. What else could you want? I'll admit it was a bit lonely out there, and the area I was going to can get you a little bit nervous, but I just told myself I was thinking too much. We've had people get lost out here and have had to help get them out, but I wasn't one of them. Anyways, I'd brought a few things with me because I was planning on heading back first thing tomorrow morning. Plus, I didn't want to carry too many things with me, so I wouldn't have a backpack that was so heavy. About an hour down this trail that goes up into the valley, I arrive at the place I had told you about. It was beautiful out there. There was no noise, no people, no distractions. All I was able to see were the stars above me and feel the cool breeze of the night. As I started setting things up, I had heard the sound of noise in the woods behind me. I was currently in a field area away from the woods, so if there was something out there, I was hoping I would see it first. I didn't see anything, but I did hear the sounds of movement. As I listened in closer, I didn't hear anything anymore, so I just assumed it was my imagination. I get a little small camp going, and I set up a small little tent. After making a little bit of food, I put everything in a small little container, and I place it away from my camp. Looking back, I should have placed it farther away from me, but I guess in my excitement, I'd made a mistake. I stayed awake listening to my radio I'd brought with me. This was during a time when you would use cassettes to listen to your music, so even though it was old-fashioned, it was still fun to relax to. Finally, I looked at my watch and I noticed it was about 11 p.m. I was going to wake up first thing at around 7 a.m. I would start making my way back to the fairgrounds, but first it was time for some sleep. Little did I know what I was supposed to expect a few hours later. I ended up waking up because, I guess silly me, I had way too much water before going to bed. I get up and go out the tent, and then I return about 5 minutes later. As I closed the tent and laid there with my eyes closed, I once again heard the sound of movement. These didn't sound like footsteps of a person. They sound like the footsteps of something much larger. I laid there frozen, not knowing exactly what to expect, but the sounds had appeared to get closer. Because there was a small little opening I could see through, my first idea was to take a look outside. I didn't want to startle whatever was out there, but when I take one look, it's myself that's startled. I see what looks to be a mama bear with two of her little baby bear cubs. One thing I know working as a park ranger is you never want to mess with mama bear. That was something I knew very well. I had to be careful not to make too much noise right now, or the mom might get startled and attack. As I laid there as quietly as I could, I had noticed something. I hadn't closed the tent all the way. Great. Now my concern was one of them stepping inside. I didn't want to get up and move to close it, because they might have seen me. I listen in as they're making their way around the campsite, presumably looking for food. It felt like an eternity, but after about 10 minutes of lying down and hoping they wouldn't find me, I hear as they slowly leave and make their way back into the woods. I was happy knowing I didn't hear them anymore, but I didn't want to step outside yet. After all, I didn't want to surprise them if one of the babies was nearby. Against everything, I stepped outside and I looked around. I didn't see anything anymore. Now radioed in my friend Bruce, and I explained everything. About an hour later, he arrives in one of the park vehicles, and he helps me get out of there. Who knew that somebody that saves people's lives would have to be saved himself? The mama bear was so sweet, but next time, I'd rather see her and the little babies from far away. Number 7. As some quick background information, I work as a park ranger at some nearby woods next to my town. This town was one of those that, unless you've lived here, you would have never heard of it. Working as a park ranger in the woods has its benefits, but one of the most eerie parts about it are all the stories you hear, especially about people getting lost. Now, I've only been working here for a few months, so I haven't really dealt with anything too serious. The most serious thing that happened was somebody was injured when climbing a tree, but that was pretty much it. One night it was just me and one other staff working. Everybody else was back home. These woods also acted as a park. We closed after 9 p.m., so there shouldn't be anybody out here at the time. At around 10 p.m. or so, I decided to do my nightly walk in the woods. This is to make sure that nobody had made their way in, or just to make sure everything was alright. I had my radio with me in case I needed to call my coworker friend Josh. He was actually training with me, so he was fairly new to the entire job. Someone needed to stay back at the little cabin area, so I told him I would go ahead and walk. I dismiss myself and start making my way into the woods. I take the usual route I'd taken, but for some reason on this night, I felt colder air, almost like it was out of place. It was September, but it'd been a warm 85 degrees during the daytime. Right now, it was still a warm 73 degrees, but I felt this cold air. It easily made it feel like 20 degrees cooler. I did find it weird, but I continued on regardless. As I made my way to the end of the trail, I get a call from Josh. Hey, I'm just calling to check up on you. How's it going out there? Anything interesting? No, nothing to report here, Josh. Just the same old, same old. With that, I decide it's time to return back. While making my way back to the building where we were, I once again felt that cold air in the same spot. It literally sent me chills, and I decided to walk faster and get out of there. After began the voices and the sound of movement. As I continued my walk in the dark, I kept hearing the sounds of people whispering and even the sounds of footsteps. What I saw next is what sent me running all the way back to Josh. As I stood there frozen, I saw what looked to be a group of people. They were wearing old-fashioned clothing and appeared to each be holding something sharp. I was out here on my own with nothing on me to stop them had they decided to follow me. I take off running. I don't look back until I'm back with Josh. As soon as I meet up with Josh, he looked just as nervous as I did. He goes to explain that while I was out there, he saw the people I'd mentioned on camera earlier. I didn't mention this, but we do have security cameras in these woods. He explains that when I started running away, they just stood there, and eventually they walked away and disappeared into the woods. The next morning, with a group of officers, we went out to check everything, but we had found nothing. Left with no real answers, I decided to look into the area and see what its history had in store. Apparently, there were some passings many years ago when farmers used to use this land. I'm not somebody who believes in that unexplained stuff, but when I think about what happened, I can't seem to explain the sudden cold spots and even the shadows too. If somebody has any ideas, it would be great to hear from you. As an update, it hasn't happened again since. If anything does happen, I'll make sure to let you all know. Number 8. This story happened when I was 19 and walking around in the woods with my friend Karen. We live in a small village in Spain where not much really happens. Our town is actually right in the middle of the woods. I loved it because we had natural shade from the sun. It was always very quiet and peaceful. The population was about 500, so you pretty much knew everybody out there. Anytime you would go to the store, you would always say hello to the people you saw. Because of this, you don't expect to run into somebody you don't know. I should quickly mention this now, but this happened back in the 1980s. Since it was very common for people to leave their doors open at night, and even walk around in the woods, this night should have been more or less the same thing. On a Tuesday night at around 9 p.m., me and Karen decided to go to a trail that's just beyond the town limits. To get there, you had to cross a large field, then you would arrive to a trail that leads into the woods. There wasn't really too much light out there, so we always had to make sure we carried some light. The plan was to walk into the woods and go to this vista that goes a little ways into the mountain. From there, you can find a small cave. There's also a ledge that overlooks the surrounding village and even the fields around you. As we walk around in the woods, everything is pretty much uneventful. As we make our way to our usual spot, we are soon joined by somebody else. At first, we were startled by the noise, but we see a man step out from behind the mountainside. I couldn't really get a good look at him, but telling by the way he spoke and walked, he didn't seem like anyone we knew. Still, we didn't want to jump to conclusions since it was dark outside. Instead, we sat there and gave him a friendly hello. He says hello back and mentions how beautiful the night was. Still, nothing too serious with him. There is some awkward talk for the next 5 minutes, and then suddenly he told us, "I'm actually not from this area. I'm on the run and hiding. You two are pretty young, so let's just say I'm playing hide and seek. Don't tell anybody you saw me out here, alright? It's our little secret." The way he said it made me and Karen very nervous. We laughed nervously, though when you're nervous about something, it seems like you end up laughing a little bit. He tells us to have a good night, and from there, walks off behind the mountainside. Alright, well that sure was weird. But of course, what made it more weird was by the way he told us. Remember, we don't even know who he is, and we've never seen him before. Me and Karen now decide it's a great idea to head back to town and tell the adults what happened. As we start making our way back down the trail, we can see the headlights of a car in the distance behind us. Quickly, me and Karen jump to the side of the trail as we can see the driver slowly going down the road. He seemed to have some sort of spotlight, and from the looks of it, he appeared to be looking for someone, or something. Could it have been he changed his mind and was now looking for us? We weren't sure, but right now we were more focused on not being part of his so-called hide and seek. Me and Karen slowly start making our way out of there as we can now hear a car door opening. Now we hear the sounds of boots walking around the trail. They sounded just like the boots of Mr. Stranger from earlier up in the mountain area. When I looked back, I noticed he was now where we had been moments before. Karen gets the brilliant idea to grab a large rock and throw it the other way. This would make him think we went the other way and he wouldn't follow us. It worked, because as soon as Karen throws it, he takes off running into the trees. We now get out of there, and once out of the woods, run all the way down the field, through the park, and back home. First thing we did was called officers. They sent a team out there to go find him, but they didn't find anyone. He had gotten away. I later found out that he had been found over 100 miles away. He was in another town. Supposedly, he was supposed to be dangerous. I didn't bother looking into it anymore, but I did just want to tell you all about it nonetheless. Number 9. This story happened when I was a senior in high school. One afternoon, I invited over my friends David and Dorothy. I wanted to go to the woods. I wanted to take graduation pictures, but my parents were way too busy. Besides, what better way to stand out than to go into the woods and take pictures by the lake? It was perfect. One end you had some abandoned cabins, on the other you can see the mountains in the distance, and on the other side there were beautiful flowers of many different colors. Since David and Dorothy needed pictures as well, I figured the three of us could go out there and take pictures ourselves. We wouldn't go too late, as to make sure we got great lighting. I borrowed my dad's camera and told them about where we were going, and we ended up leaving at around 3 p.m. When we arrived to the woods, we hadn't noticed anything too different. Apart from it being unusually quiet, all was going well. We had actually planned on staying out there until later that night, then returning and going back home. We park our car next to a trail and make our uneventful walk to the lake. When we arrived there, nobody was around us. We unpacked some things we had with us and start taking pictures. Honestly, looking back, we spent over an hour trying to get the perfect photos. I'm somewhat of a photo expert, so I wanted to not only take pictures for senior year, I also wanted to take the opportunity to take pictures of the nature around us. That ended up taking a little bit longer than usual. As I was taking one of the pictures, I happened to see movement through the lens. It looked like a group of people walking away in the trees, but when I looked over there, I'd seen nothing. I figured my eyes were playing tricks on me, so I just ignored it and didn't mention it anymore. At this point, it's about 6:30 p.m., and we sat down to have some food we had brought with us. We would stay until sunset, and once it got dark, we would return home. As we sat there by the lake, I had once again seen movement in the corner of my eye. It appeared it was movement from one of the nearby abandoned cabins. Though a bit surprised and nervous, I once again tried to ignore it. Before we finished the food, David went to go put the camera and other things back in the car. We would end up leaving soon. As we waited for him to return, we sat there a little while longer continuing to talk. Suddenly, there's the sound of movement, and out step out two people from the woods. Honestly, they look like they've been living out here for a long time. We were alarmed but tried to act calm. That's when one of them says, "What are the two of you doing out here? You shouldn't be out here." "Since you are here, would you like to see our dogs we have back at the cabins? They just had puppies, and they're really cute. Come on." We told them no thank you, especially by the way he had said it. It appeared like they were up to no good. We got up to excuse ourselves, and notice that now one of them steps in front of us. You know, it's not nice to just leave like that. Come on, I promise you, it'll be alright. Follow us back to the cabin. We even have snacks. This was turning out to be bad. In that moment, we can hear a car approaching us. It was David. I guess in all the commotion, he had noticed these two that had walked up to us. He comes in fast with a car horn, and these two take off running into the woods. Quickly, we jump inside and we get out of there. David told us as he was putting things away he had seen those two. He wasn't going to take any chances, and that explains why he caught up to us so fast. That should have been the end of that, but looking back at a few photos, we made a surprising discovery. In one of the photos, you can see what looks like the two in the background behind some of the trees. So when I saw the movement when I was taking the photos, I wasn't just seeing things. We haven't been back there since, so I'm not exactly sure if they're still out there or not. Number 10. When I was 14 years old, me, my mom, and my dad were staying in a cabin vacation home out in the Rockies. We were in an area that was nothing but woods and nature all around you, but not too far away there was a small town. Here we could pick up supplies as well as anything else that we needed. When we got there, everything was going pretty well. Nothing seemed too out of the ordinary, aside from seeing some scratch marks on the windows and the doors. I did find that weird, but my dad told me that it was most likely just some bears. They were most likely scratching their backs with the side of the cabin. I mean, I guess it was an alright explanation. Still, I wasn't really buying it. That afternoon was pretty much uneventful. We spent the majority of it checking out the nearby sights and taking in the beauty of the nature. Later on that night after dinner, we wanted to watch a movie. But the thing is, we forgot to rent a movie or even bring one with us. I really wanted to watch a movie, and because my mom and dad felt so bad, they thought we should go and rent one from the nearby video store in town. I told them I didn't want to go since I was tired and said I would stay. They insisted I go, and so after 5 minutes of yes and no, I ended up going with them. Looking back, we are so thankful nobody was home at the time. We make the half-hour drive to town and we rent the movie and buy some popcorn. After we make our way back up into the mountain area, that's when we see something. As we're driving up there, we can see what looks to be a vehicle going down the path. Remember the one that heads up to our house? That was the one. We found it weird considering they were driving back from that cabin, but we didn't mind it yet. It wasn't until we arrived back at the cabin that we noticed something was off. The first and most obvious thing was the front door and windows were wide open. We know for certain we closed them. My dad tells me and my mom to wait in the car, and he walks around outside and inside, checking everything. After he walks back on over to unlock the car, he tells us the unfortunate news. Turns out that most of the things we had brought with us had been taken. Looking back on it, I may have avoided a bad ending had I stayed there by myself. My parents would have been at least 30 minutes away from the woods, and I would have been there all alone. We had called some nearby park rangers to check out the area, but since they hadn't left anything behind, we couldn't get a description of the car, the people, or the license plate. There really wasn't much that could be done. It was unfortunate, but in the end, we're just glad our vacation to those woods didn't turn out differently. Well, hello there, you wonderful person. Looks like you've made it to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's adventures. So tell me, which experience was your favorite? Let me know. I would really like to know. Personally, I love this story with the heroes, with the park rangers saving that man. That was pretty awesome. So yes, I know I'm sorry, this is the end of today's video, but don't worry, next time we're going to be back with even more experiences to tell. So until then, I'll see you all next time. Take care and have a wonderful day.